have a panel now of next generation innovators working on future urban spaces. So I'm very pleased to have with me from your left to your right, Max Bloomfield, co-founder of VundaHaus, Leonard Carey, co-founder of Awaretag, and Alex Fink, Chief Strategy Officer and Executive Director of Project Etopia. We have a short slide from each of these organisations to give a very quick introduction. So I'm going to start with, I hope they come up in the correct order, with Max.
So yeah, I'm co-founder and Chief Product Officer of VundaHaus, and we are making home insulation cheaper, easier, and sexier. So what we're developing is a prefabricated home wrap solution, which improves air tightness, indoor air quality, and with ventilation and insulation. And this makes homes healthier, cheaper to heat, and much more comfortable to live in. So how we're doing that is using off-site manufacture. So we're working with 3D LiDAR scanning, creating a digital twin of each property, which we then use to automate with software the design and fabrication, off-site fabrication of our kit of parts, which then delivered to site for rapid installation in just 2 days. So we're creating a system and a product which is going to make retrofits cheaper, easier, and more affordable, more scalable for low-rise residential dwellings.
Great, thank you very much. Leonard?
Hi everyone, I've been told to project a bit, so hopefully you can hear me. So Aware Technologies, Awaretag is our brand. What we do, we use sensor technology and AI to get a full picture, full understanding of the performance of homes. And we're doing this because we're working specifically in the social housing space, where it's really hard to get fair outcomes in a lot of the properties that we have in social housing, simply because we don't understand how those buildings perform and how we as people influence or have an impact on those buildings. So we do almost like a full body scan of a building with people in it, so we can understand how the structure, the walls, how they perform with insulation, and we give it a U value and cold bridging effect, but also how the ventilation and the heating works, put it all together in a 3D digital twin, and hopefully use that to help people to come up with better remedies, whether it be insulation, whether it be some more funding just to get them through the winter, or whether it be better ventilation as well.
Lovely, thank you. And then finally, Alex.
Hi, I'm Alex from Project Etopia. We are a Category 2 MMC system. So rather build our traditional building materials, we build out of the panels we can see above to deliver net zero ready buildings. We work with developers, housing associations, councils to develop these buildings. And the scope of our services, we design or help design, manufacture, supply and install the shell of the building. So we tend to come in, once the foundations are laid, we lay a track, and then we deliver our panelised system in large panel format, and we can erect a pair of semi-detached houses in around 3 days. So much quicker than building traditionally.
Excellent, thank you. So I'm going to start with a couple of questions about data. Max and Leonard, the two of you in particular talked about the data that you're using for your products. Could you perhaps talk a bit about where the data landscape in this world, where you're getting your data from, how easy it is to access that data, what could maybe be done in order to support better access to data? Yeah.
Should I go first? Okay. So for everything that we do, yes, we take data from the house using sensors. But also we take data from the outside environments as well, but also any open data sets as well. The open data sets that we take are things that you would normally find in an EPC evaluation, so building type, the structure and so on. But also we work with some charities and councils and housing associations about what are the vulnerabilities of people as well. And when we put all that data together, you get a sense of what's the right thing to do with this property? How are we going to take somebody on a journey of how they're going to live better in that house, or with a council or a housing association, whether they're going to demolish the house or build something new. The trouble is, and forgive me for all the acronyms, it's data protection impact assessments, data sharing agreements. All of those things take a long time to agree and get in place, and that slows things down a lot. But we understand it, but it does slow things down in trying to come up with those solutions.
Max?
Yeah, so our data needs are quite specific, and it comes down to the external features that are on the building. So being able to assess those through a survey of the front and rear and sides as well of the property. So we're really relying there initially on sort of very basic assessments with street view for the front facade can be sufficient, but to get the back, we're reliant more on kind of surveys such as from drones, which can tell us what the back of the property looks like and what features are there, so we can do our initial assessment of whether that is a property type that we can treat. The second stage is the sort of the accurate dimensional data that we need for the offsite to enable the offsite manufacturing, and that's we need to send someone to site, and we need to use 3D LiDAR scanning technologies, so using Leica or Matterport cameras to capture that data in a reliable fashion and to a sort of like few millimeter level of accuracy, which is what you need for prefabricating our kit.
So we use data in two different ways at Etopia. The first way is more about data in the manufacturing side of the business. When you're juggling 10 different orders of different sizes and different amounts to 10 different clients, and your manufacturing panels, of which we have around 56 different types, size of panel, because we work to all brick dims. If an architect makes a slight change to the plan, it determines what panels we print in what order. If a site gets delayed, we have to rejig the manufacturing round. So we're printing this one first, so we know which one's being delivered to site first. The second way we obviously use data is in the performance of the home. So we like to do monitoring post occupancy as well as before, to check that our buildings are operating at the level that we've sold them to the clients at.
Great, thank you. And maybe a question about how your innovations fit into the decarbonisation space and how they're moving the dial towards net zero. And what kind of data do you maybe collect, or what do you know about the impact that your products are having on decarbonisation?
Yeah, great question. We produce net zero ready houses. I think we're adding a lot to the net zero drive. We've undergone EPDs and LCAs on our product, so we know what carbon our houses are embodied, as well as life cycle, as well as the performance of the homes. Out of the 200 odd homes that have already been lived in to date, our average EPC ratings, even though they're not the best judge, are averaging at 105 over 100, so above an A. And a lot of the houses are generating more electricity they use, especially over the summer months, which for people in housing association housing, when it's a choice between heating and eating, it's nice to take away that part of heating from the equation.
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of assessing which houses require external wall insulation, which is what our product provides, and air tightness measures as well, and ventilation, it is quite straightforward to see on the EPC whether those properties have those measures already or not. In terms of getting their current performance level, we don't do blower door tests like air tightness testing, but what we do is try and obtain the smart meter data for the last 12 months or as far back as we can do, so we can establish what kind of baseline we have on that data. I think the thing that Alex touched on on fuel poverty, and that makes things really difficult to measure because you don't know whether people are heating their properties sufficiently. So what you want to do is have smart meter data coupled with an internal temperature measurement. And so if you can set that up before and have a before and after, then that's ideal. In most cases, we're putting in that monitoring for afterwards, so at least we can know what the post retrofit performance is, and how that building's being used as well, how it's being heated. I think that's particularly important as we move to heat pumps, because they have a different way of heating. They work better when the building's continuously heated, and that's part of one of our main focuses is in enabling heat pumps, and we see that insulation is really critical for ensuring that you can heat your house continuously, not just blast it morning and evening when you're at home, and that's not going to cost you more in the long run.
Yeah, I guess for us it's so we calculated heat loss ratios for 8 million homes and the social housing sector. And for those of you familiar with heat loss ratios, it's really about, well, how well can the fabric of that building retain heat, I suppose, through the ceilings, walls, floors. And so at that very early stage, we've done that calculation so that you can kind of pinpoint those properties that you're going to have to go to say, well, for the net zero journey, those are the priority ones. Post retrofit, we're doing a lot of work with retrofit teams now, just before they do the retrofit, to say, are we sure we want to put in these single room heat recovery systems? Because actually, is it going to make the difference? Is the U value of that wall really that bad or that good? And is there going to be a difference if we changed it or we added more insulation? So for us, the data is all about how do you pick the ones you need to go to first, and then after that, it's, well, what are you actually going to do in that property to make the biggest difference? And once you've done it, does it make the difference? So it's all data.
Okay. Yeah. Do we have any questions from the audience?
I have a question. Sorry, excuse me. So there's a couple of things actually. Leonard, you were talking about data sharing, and that you spend a lot of time negotiating those. Is there no sort of approach towards a standardised? Because you said you're always having to do it, and surely what you need to use the data for, and what they're prepared to allow you to use the data for, must be pretty well known by now. What's the challenge there? What's the real difficulty? Is it just because people are scared? Yeah.
Is there anybody in this room from a council or housing association? Right. Okay. Nobody's recording. Oh, someone is recording this. Data sharing, we'd love to be able to do it, but there's always someone or an organisation or group in the organisation that's been on the latest ICO course, and people panic. They absolutely panic about what is identifiable data and what's geographical, and I get it, because only a couple of days ago, one of the hospitals, there's a breach there, so we get it. Hopefully, there will come a point where councils and housing associations have that data in such a structure where it can be just ticking the box. They're not there yet. They're just not there yet.
Because I think the ICO have been quite proactive, I think, in trying to sort of change their approach to enabling as opposed to kind of. It's
kind of interpretation as well.
Yeah.
Because I think we all know that you could just have a postcode, and although it's, represents 18 properties, if you then have another bit of information that says, oh, and this house has someone over 65 with a respiratory condition, put the two together.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's a fair point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions from the floor? No? I have one. Oh, Dan. Oh, no, sorry. I actually have another one.
Okay.
How accurate can we be in sort of measuring the sort of the carbon footprint of a property or a building? I don't know who might want to pick that up.
Well, you can be relatively accurate in terms of we know roughly where we get the materials from. We know, obviously, you've got different suppliers. Sometimes it comes from different places, but relatively you can know, like for like roughly, I think with around 11% differentiation accuracy, whereabouts you come through on an EPD or an LCA. But obviously, if there's delays or extra days on site that you don't expect and there's more cars going to site, it affects the carbon in use of what you've measured against. So you can be relatively accurate, but at the same time, there's always unforeseens that you don't know about.
I think in terms of, I'm not sure whether your question was more towards operational or embodied, but in terms of the trade-off between those two, and it is a trade-off when you're doing retrofit, because you're adding to the building, the existing structure, you're adding embodied carbon no matter which materials you're using, aside from potentially biogenic carbon, but I would tend to count that as a zero carbon material. But there's still embodied carbon in the short term versus long term. It gets a bit more complex. If we're talking about standard building materials, the important thing is what's the payback time. So most houses, over 80% still running on gas boilers. The important thing is that we enable those houses to switch to decarbonised heating. And our calculations suggest that it's 2 to 3 year payback, even using quite high embodied carbon insulation materials. And that's worth doing, for sure. That picture's going to change with time. So as more houses switch to electrified heat, particularly with heat pumps, their operational carbon just drops off a cliff, and they'll be 90% decarbonised. At that point, it's a much trickier question: how much fabric is worth? How much do we improve the fabric, taking into account the embodied carbon that's going to entail?
I don't see any more questions on the floor just yet, so I'm just going to take a chair's prerogative to...
Lucy, sorry, there was a question over here.
Sorry, I didn't quite see you there.
Of the range of housing stock of the UK or a typical city, what type of housing is the most difficult to retrofit from your perspective? Council housing or private housing? What is the nightmare scenario and what it is? Oh, this is easy, we've done it plenty of time, no problem.
Yeah, did you say public or private? Yeah. I mean, in terms of house type, it's really the older properties, the solid wall properties that are hardest to treat, and those are the ones that we're targeting with our system. Probably the hardest of those are the ones that are in conservation areas, and the ones where they're very strict planning, such as a lot of the ones in central London, Westminster, kind of places. But they're not our target. So our target is the solid wall properties, but the ones that don't have that aren't heritage properties, they don't have particular planning constraints, and those are the ones where there is scope to come up with a scalable product, which ours is, which can treat those properties in a cost-effective way.
Any more?
You slightly touched on it already in terms of payback. Payback periods are a big blocker for many renewables and green sort of sectors. What are you seeing in terms of the behavior of the large housing organizations or large organizations who manage properties, who look at payback and go, you're not meeting my 2-year payback cycle or my 5-year payback cycle. So what's the sort of key blockers? What's the feeling that you're seeing out there in the market at the moment, and any views on changing that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Not to be critical of the house builders, they're in it to make profit, and unless your product can deliver them net zero or better performing building without adding any or very, very little cost to them, they're going to build the way that they build unless the standards change. So obviously we're welcoming in the Future Home Standard 2025. We're, as an organisation, we're upset that there weren't higher metrics on building fabric and building performance included in there. But the key is getting the product to the price where they can afford it, and they will switch to you, because as long as you can deliver it in the scale that they need and they want, if you're offering them the same product but much greener for the same price, they're going to take it. So they're all very keen to explore MMC. We speak to a lot of them, and we're working on some. It's just, does the project fit the price? Otherwise, they'll build to a traditional standard if you can't match the price of traditional.
I think with retrofit, it's a slightly different challenge, and the payback is you need to take account of planned maintenance schedules, and if you can deal with some of that maintenance when you're doing the retrofit and factor that into your cost projections over the next 30 years. Another thing is that you want to consider what the costs of where was I going with that train of thought? Sorry? Well, the cost of not doing it. I mean, the main benefits, right, are in terms of comfort and health of the occupants, and I think within social housing that message is starting to ring through after the tragic death of Awab and other examples like it. And social housing do have a duty of care to their residents, and many of them do have a social mission. And we're also starting to see signs that ESG funding is being channeled more into that sector for these reasons. And it's not all about payback, it's about creating healthier, more comfortable homes and tackling some of the social problems we have in this country.
I was going to also say that housing associations don't want to be building new build that are going to be their retrofits of tomorrow. They care more about their stock. Same with people that doing private rentals or anything like that, because they're holding onto the asset for a long time. While, as you were referring to, the big house builders just sell it and then after the 2-year period kind of forget about it. So they're less bothered about how it's going to perform over a long time.
Yeah, I was just going to add to the social housing, because we speak to a lot of social housing providers and councils as well. And you're right, their motivation is about the comfort, well-being, but also they just don't want to be going back to these properties over and over and over again. So they are planning these longer time period improvements, and they're not just on the 2-year payback. It's over a longer period of time.
Any more? We've got a few more minutes for our last one.
If there are no more questions, I maybe just ask I've got a couple of final questions, so I'll let you choose which one or both you answer. The first is really it's kind of related to the previous conversation, which is about the finance models that might begin to emerge around this, both in the kind of public and private sector. Be keen to hear your views on how they're emerging and how they might help your products and services scale. And the second question is about the regulations. Alex talked about the Future Home Standard. I think Leonard and Max, you both talked about the EPC. Would be very keen to hear what your thoughts are on how those regulations could or should change in the future to support your work. So maybe start with you, Alex, and come down the line.
Yeah, both very good questions. As I said, the Future Home Standard is a really important piece of legislation. And the hope is it will force people into building greener homes. There's no reason why we can't do it, and you'd be surprised about the little cost it costs per home to actually get it to a much higher standard. But as I said, the resistance is coming from the major house builders because they want to make as much profit as possible. And even by adding, £6,000 a house, you can make a huge difference to be building all houses new, coming in at EPC level A, just by increasing the build fabric and adding on, the air source heat pump and a bit of solar, and so it really needs to be a strictly enforced standard, and it needs to be higher than the current consultation currently is, and it's something we welcome. In terms of financing, we're working with Homes England on a site. They're very good with green financing, and so are the other banks. They're really trying, though it's not perfect. When we talk about green mortgages, we were offering green mortgages to our buyers until they reflected to us actually that the standard mortgage was actually cheaper than the green mortgage in Barclays, and that's because we were probably the only person to apply for a green mortgage with Barclays. So since then they reviewed it and go, oh Jesus, and then readjusted it, but it just shows how many people are taking up green mortgages and green finance products currently.
Leonard?
Yeah, I think I can't speak so much about the financial structures, because what the space that we work within is in the social housing space. It's all about, I've got a £100 million budget on repairs, and how do I save money on that, because the rental income is going down, and so it's all about how do we find a way to actually truly demonstrate that you can make a saving by truly understanding how the house performs, but also whether you're going to retrofit it or not. So that bit is something, it's a journey, right? But I think as regards legislation, anything that's coming down the road, yeah, we are dealing with those organisations that are having to think about new legislation where they have to respond in 48 hours to a problem of damp and mould. Where they are working within PAS 2035, I guess you work with PAS 2035 retrofit standards, where you be able to demonstrate that it's not just about the fabric of the building that's an improvement, but also the person as well, that their bills have gone down. It's interesting though, PAS 2035, not everybody is, it's an interesting landscape. So hopefully there's going to be more enforcement of these things.
Great, thank you. And final word to Max.
Yes, you touched on PAS 2035, which is great because it's done very well to kind of prevent unintended consequences in retrofits, or public funded retrofits at least where it's applied. But the problem with it is that it's too prescriptive. It is a big blocker to innovation. In order to get a product PAS 2035 or Trustmark approved, requires 9 months and costs over £100,000, and that's sort of the starting point. Then every time you make a change to your product, you have to go through that whole process again. So how are we expecting new innovations to come into this marketplace that is so sorely needed if we put up these huge barriers to bringing new products to market? So there clearly needs to be some kind of support mechanism to help innovations through by providing insurance, by helping to get them on the government-funded projects, probably initially doing small numbers of homes, but if you can demonstrate through a small number of homes that your product works, then you should be able to be added to that approved list quite straightforwardly, and not have to spend this huge amount of money with a private company, which is essentially a gatekeeper for the market, and it's clearly making huge profits and has no incentive to speed things up. So I think that's my mini rant on that.
I wasn't going to say that, but yeah.
Great. Well, we'll maybe end on that call to action there, I think. So thank you very much. Please join me in thanking Alex, Leonard, and Max.